David, my man, welcome to the Dad Edge. David Waldy, right?
That's right. Like
Yeah.
Waldo with a Y, my man.
That's actually kind of what I was thinking. I was like, well, it's kind of like where's Waldo? It's kind of like that. Did you
Well,
get that growing up?
what's funny? If I had a nickel, because I grew up in Kansas, so there's two things.
Right.
If I had a nickel for every time somebody made a Waldo joke or said
Yeah.
you're not in Kansas anymore, man, I'd be a wealthy man.
Oh, dude. Like I understand that so much. So yeah, because that was kind of some of the things that came to my mind too when I first when I read your bio before we jumped on today. And growing up with a name like Larry, that name isn't the easiest one because I got like, oh, where's Mo and Curly? I got that all the time. And then being your name's Larry Hagner, which by the way is so close to Larry Hagman, who played JR from Dallas. Like everyone, says that one too. So yeah, there's that.
Well, I went straight to Veggie Tales. Sorry, bro. Like
Larry the
Larry
cucumber.
Cucumber.
Right. I'll take that one. That's kind of cool because I'd be like, I would just tell my wife and be like, hey, there's a
Where's my
vegetable named
hairbrush?
after me. I've known her for so long, man. She'd be like, oh, always about that. Well, dude, man, it's so good to have you on. Obviously, the audience got to learn who you are, what you're all about, but I want to hear from you, man. Um, family life, what does it look like right now?
Family life right now, gosh, it is so good and challenging and stretching all at the same
Yeah.
time. I've got three little ones, five, three, and one. My wife, she is freaking super mom. She's full time mom, and she's actually got the kids. She had to take the boys today to get a couple shots, and so we had our pep talk this morning. It was like, "You're gonna be brave. You're gonna be courageous." And Bear, my middle one, he's like, "I want a Spider-Man, Spider-Man. What's it called? Band-Aid." Super excited about getting the Spider-Man Band-Aid, but life for us right now, Larry, is it's an adventure, man, like every single day. So my normal routine, I usually get up, head to the gym, come back. My wife and I will spend some time working out, depending on if the baby slept or not. We may just she might just sleep an extra hour or so, and I'll have the kiddos, and then we have breakfast together. Then I usually jump into work for a few hours, break for lunch, spend some time with them. Sometimes sneak in a power nap, which is my favorite.
What's a
And
nap? What are these things that people call
oh my
naps? I'm
god.
we were talking. My wife celebrated a birthday this past weekend, and we all went out with couples, and all there was one person we were out with four of the couples. There was one person in every married group that takes a nap every day, and I was like, "Are you people serious? Like how?" Number one, I still to this day can't figure out how to sleep in the day. Like if the sun's up, I cannot sleep.
You want
And
the
number
trick? I can tell you mine.
yes, what
Okay.
is it?
So it's called military tactical napping. Okay.
Oh,
Now,
now you made it sound really cool too on top of it. So that's
oh,
cool.
bro, it's legit. And so I don't know I don't know if they teach it across all armed forces, but I learned this one time. I feel like I was listening to Jocko Willink one time talking about these tactical naps. And it's a training protocol that they use whenever they're in like high stress situations and they desperately need some form of recharge, is that you get your knees above your heart. And so usually you want to lay on the floor with your knees up on the couch or on a chair, or if you are laying on a couch or a bed, stack as many pillows underneath your legs as possible. So basically your legs are at a 45-degree angle, and then you've got them above your heart. And then all you're going to do is box breathing until basically you pass out. So 3 to 4 seconds out, right? So, or 3 to 4 seconds in through the nose. So deep breath in through the nose and then deep breath out through. You use box breathing in conjunction with that posture basically. And then what I like to do is I couple it with a form of visualization. And so I'll try and go to the secret place, or I'll imagine something and I'm just kind of lost in space or in the forest, just pretending I'm on an event. I know it sounds crazy, but you do that and you set an alarm for like 20 minutes. That's it, 20 minutes. And I'm telling you, man, there is something about it where if I go longer than like 20 to 30 minutes, I'm exhausted. I get up from my nap and I'm just like, just want to go back to sleep. But something about 20 to 30 minutes, these little tactical naps, even 15, you wake up from your alarm and you feel like you feel better than any morning you've ever woken up before, and just chock full of energy. And so, yeah, I try and sneak in those when I can. Just depends on how the kids are doing that day. So give that a try.
I had no idea. And you made it sound so cool. Like,
Well, it is
it's so
cool.
it is cool. What's so funny is that we just watched my oldest and I we watched Lone Survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And there's this part, after Mark Wahlberg and the three other guys who, when they reach their post, right, where they're supposed to be taking photos and all that, like they go under a tree and Mark Wahlberg like passes out and takes a nap. And my son was like, how in the world can he sleep? Like wouldn't he be on like high alert? And I was like, dude, that's a good question. I don't know. But you just explained it. I had no idea it was like a tactical thing that like these SEALs do, but that now it's like you just put that cool factor into it.
Well, I think the biggest part about it that I've learned, because I've studied, like I get these hyperfixations on different subjects. That one of my hyperfixations over the last like 3 to 4 years has really been around emotional regulation, nervous system regulation, and all the things that go into stress and anxiety and tension and all that stuff. And what I've learned is like if you can, like breathing, I know it sounds so elementary and simple, but I truly believe it's the simple things that confound the wise. If you can understand the power of breath and you study things like Wim Hof breathing, or all these people that there's certain breathing exercise, you literally transform your blood, your cells, like the stress, like your entire body, your physiological body can be transformed in 60 seconds or less just by breathing, and bring your state to a completely, like your nervous system gets completely regulated. And when you're completely regulated, you're not stressed, you're not thinking, you're not like, your brain's not firing a million thoughts a second. And I think that's probably the key, is that, yeah, I'm sure there's something to your legs being above your heart. More than anything, it's the breathing.
Mm.
um, and it's a game changer, man. It is absolutely a game changer.
Let's talk about this for a second, because that's a really good point. I really obviously want to get into everything that you do, but I want to bounce this off of you because I just learned this myself. Um, so, and especially this might really resonate with the work that you do. So, unfortunately, I'm going to share a quick story, and I'm going to share, the journey of this and how it all came to be. So, my business partner, Jason, um, I've been working with him in Dad Edge since 2016, and he has a 19-year-old daughter. And I received a text literally last Wednesday night. I was out to dinner with my wife, and the text read, "My beautiful daughter Chloe was just killed in a car accident." Now, my friend and business partner Jason is a jokester, and sometimes he's extreme. And my heart just sank, and I was like, "Is this for real? Like, would he text me this, or would he call me? Like, this can't." You automatically go to denial, like this can't be real,
Mm.
because I know everything about him as a dad. I know everything about her, right? And I said, "Jason, are you being serious?" And he didn't respond. And I said, "Jason," and he said, I wish I was kidding." And I tried to call him, and of course he didn't answer. He's like, "I'm on my way to my parents' house right now to tell them, and then I'm on my way to tell my younger daughter." And he's like, "I can't talk about it right now." And my heart just sank, man. So I turns out everything was true. Very tragic. He's also my best friend, and seeing him walk through that, um, I was absolutely distraught. And because you look at your kids differently, and I'm an empath. I'm an empathetic person, so I do feel other people's pain. And it hit not just me hard, but our entire Dad Edge community hard, because everybody knows Jason. And there was like this outpouring of just love and support, but also like I was being pinged every 2 to 3 seconds. It felt like, "What can we do for Jason? I got this idea. I got that idea." And it was like this floodgate of like just people needing stuff, and Jason needing stuff, and our clients needing stuff. It was so much. And then I noticed throughout that evening, I got so stressed out and overwhelmed and so emotionally charged over it that this sounds counterintuitive, but I was like, I almost didn't know what to do with myself. Like I literally, this true story. It's really weird. I drove to the gym 3 times that day throughout the day, once in the morning, once in the afternoon, once in the evening. Finally, in the evening, I stayed in the parking lot. I actually went in the gym. The other 2 times I just came back home. And because I would drive around just trying to figure out like where my head was at. And I noticed that I was short with my wife, kind of crabby, even though like you would think like I'd be more empathetic, but it was like I was just so emotionally charged. And my wife looked at me, and I wasn't like mean or anything, but like I was just like charged up. And she's like, "Larry, you need to get out of here." And I was like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "You got to go do something for yourself." just to get your head straight, like just go to the gym, go work out, like go do something. And then of course that made me feel terrible too. I'm like, am I being bad? She's like, no, but I can tell like you're hurting. Like, please go do something. Go fill your cup. So I did that. And it really left me with this question of like, why couldn't I be better in that moment? Like, why? And a really bad question, by the way. Why couldn't I be more resilient in that moment? And I've noticed just over the years, like I'm better when it comes to resilience. Like I can take on a lot, but there are also times where something big happens and I snap, something little happens and I can snap. It's not often, but it does happen. And I'm always like, God bless, like, why can't I be better about that? Just so happened this past weekend, just a few days after it happened, I had breakfast with one of our alliance guys. Came in town. He was from DC. He's been in the military for years. He's one of those high, I can't really talk about what he does or anything like that, but he's a high operator, has been through tons of training. And I was telling him about this. And because I was asking him, I was like, does anything ever get to you? He's like, no, not really. He's like, I've had training around this though. I was like, well, what do I do in that moment? Like, what do we do in that moment? Like I've talked to all these experts. He goes, well, let me share a quote with you. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And I was like, what does that mean? He goes, slow down. I was like, I don't understand what you're talking about. And he's like, what do you do when you're stressed out? I said, I work out. And he goes, exactly. Why do you do that? I was like, because it's a physical release. He goes, yeah, but that's actually not what's going on. I was like, well, what's going on? He goes, you're working out slows those thoughts down. And I was like, never thought of it that way. He's like, think about it. You got all this stress. You got this thought coming in. I'm stressed out about this. And then I'm thinking about this. And now I feel an imposter over here. My wife just told me I need to leave and go do this and this and this. It's like a barrage. He's like, when you work out, everything slows down because you're focusing on the reps, you're focusing on the workout. You're not focusing on, 20 thoughts coming at you in under 10 seconds. And he's like, you know what I do? And this is like a big, burly, bearded, like high ranking officer. He's like, you know what I do? I was like, what? He goes, I bake bread. I was like, you do what? He goes, I bake bread. I was like, you bake bread? And he's like, yeah. I was like, what? Why? He's like, because you have to be insanely patient when you're kneading the dough. You have to be really patient with like the yeast and the rising. And like, it's like a hour-long process to bake this bread. He's like, but it slows me down. He's like, so let me repeat that. He goes, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. When you're smooth, you can think faster and you can do things better, but you have to slow down first. So I wanted to share that with you because number one, it was like this aha realization for me. But from what you do and this like this empathetic way of operating, how does that land for you?
It's in alignment with everything that I have experienced and everything that I've studied. All the research, all the studies that tie to our ability to experience life and to handle these significant swings in the emotional experiences of life. One of the things that we oftentimes focus on, and I see this a lot, it's rampant right now, Larry, is that everyone is looking to find ways to mitigate against
Yeah.
pain, uncertainty,
Mm.
and work. Those are the three things. Outside of death and taxes, those three things are guaranteed in this life. It does not matter what you do and how hard you try. You will always have pain. There will always be uncertainty, and you will always have work to do. And what I see, the mistake that so many people are making right now is that instead of learning how to thrive in and through, how to make it through in a healthy way, in an emotionally regulated way, and to be able to confront pain and to walk through pain and to confront the uncertainty and walk through the uncertainty and to look at the work that we do. And I'm not just talking about work to make money, but working on our minds, on our spirit, our bodies, like the work that we have to do. What I've found really interesting in this, I wish I could cite the study and I might be able to find it, but one of the most recent studies that I read, it was all around habit formation. I promise there's a point to this, is around habit formation and how we really are able to rewire our brains. So when you look at the neuroscience, we know there's some incredible. You've probably heard of like Atomic Habits by I think it's is that
James
James
Clear.
Clear. Yeah,
Yeah.
James Clear. There's a deeper dive, if you really want to get into it, by Charles Duhigg, is The Power of Habit. And there's a lot of books that have been written about habit. But the research started to indicate and show, and it's finally been proved out, that you can't replace, or you can't like stop a bad habit. The only way that you can change it is replacing it. You effectively have to overwrite your programming, your coding for how you see the world and how you operate, how you think, what you believe, all these different types of things. And this ties to our entire experience of life. Why this is so important in the context of what you're talking about is that when we are able to slow down, when we are able to actually be very intentional that no matter what we're experiencing, we are regulated. And when I say regulated, meaning that we are in control of our emotional state. We're not allowing anything outside to dictate, dominate, or determine our emotional state. Now, is it going to impact it? Yes, right? You can't control all the variables. Things are going to, you're going to feel hurt. You're going to feel pain. You're going to feel betrayal. You're going to feel joy. You're going to feel all of these different types of emotions. But the question is are you feeling them to a degree that is still within your control, or are these things overwhelming you, right? Good, bad, or ugly. Are the feelings overwhelming you? And I would venture to guess that this gentleman that you were speaking with, he's developed enough through the process of replacing habits to where he's been able to come to a point that he knows when he is feeling emotionally stimulated in an unhealthy way, and he's able to stop that before it gets out of hand. That's the hardest thing. But the reason that you talk about slow is smooth, smooth is fast, the research study that I was just talking about, they have now proven through a bunch of different tests that what we previously believed about peace and joy and contentment and fulfillment and our experience of life as it pertains to our habits, which are our choices, our behaviors, right? That if you intentionally work on, say, confidence, right? Or you intentionally work on not snoozing, like getting to the gym every day. You take any habit, right? Any behavior that is out of alignment, you're like, I hate this. This is a bad habit. This is something that I don't like. That if you intentionally focus on working on that consistently, you can replace the habit in somewhere between 21 and 90 days. However, this is a big however, Larry. If you don't go slow, slow is smooth, smooth is fast. If you don't take time for healthy self-care, nervous system regulation, emotional regulation, and rest, it can take you up to 18 months to rewire your brain and change that habit. So all these people that are talking about hustle and grind and work hard and do, like, I get it. Like, I believe there's seasons for hustle, there's seasons for working hard. But in this frame that we're looking at, this life and what we're experiencing and the pain and the difficulty, the uncertainty, these things, what's hard about what you went through and what's hard about what it was Jason, right? Did I get the name right? Mm-hmm. Is that as painful as that is, part of that is the experience of the full spectrum of human emotion that we can experience in life. That if we don't experience some of these things, life becomes kind of hollow, which is where a lot of people that we see in the world today, you see this a lot of times in just in culture and society, people are living vicariously through movies, through games, through social media, and they're just looking for feeling because they're not out there actually experiencing life and being able to have these ups and downs of all the emotions. And I say all that because I think the slow is smooth, smooth is fast. It's so important for us to recognize if you want to be able to transform any area of your life and to develop more control over yourself, right? We can't control anything else. It's coming to this place where it's like, okay, I want to learn how to control what I can control. And I want to learn how to let go of trying to control the things I was never made to control. The only way to do that, I shouldn't say the only way, the fastest way to do that is slow and smooth, with rest, with this patient approach to consistency, not this die hard, like, let's go and make it happen. And I'm going to, nothing against 75 hard and stuff like that. But there are a lot of things out there on the market today that emphasize, like, you got to grind, go, when the research proves the exact opposite. The exact opposite.
So like, it's funny because I used to be a part of like the 4 a.m. club,
Hmm.
and I used to take a lot of pride in being like, I only sleep 5 hours a night. Like literally, and I did. I took, I had a workout partner that met me, I picked him up 4:10 every morning. I took a lot of pride in, and here's the interesting thing. We worked out so hard, and then I felt like I just like won the day, before 6 a.m. And then, but the funny thing was, is I was like still the skinny fat guy. Like, I was like 195 pounds, about 18% body fat. And I'm like, why am I not like, I'm like working my tail off. Like I'm eating pretty clean. Like I should be pretty lean. Wasn't working. And then my son, who is 15 now, last year in January, he had this grandiose idea on December 31st in 2021. He's like, "Hey, in 2022, I want to do a bodybuilding show with you." And I was like, he's like, "Oh, and by the way, it's on April 29th." It gave us 16 weeks to prep for it. I'm like, and I was like, "Dude, have you looked at me lately? Like I might need like a year, right?" Um, but here's what happened. The interesting thing is I stopped working out with that workout partner. I started working out with my son after school, and I started logging 2 hours more sleep per night. So instead of like this 4.5, 5 hours of sleep, I now is getting, 6, 7, sometimes on a really lucky night, close to 8. And I dropped 30 pounds in 16 weeks and went from like 18% body fat to 7. And that was the only thing I changed was more sleep. And it was fascinating to me. I was like, wow. I mean, granted, I did tighten up my diet, right? I had to do that. But I think looking back on it, I was just talking about this with another friend of mine. I was like, I actually think, and the science will prove that too. I knew that. I actually have a degree in health. I was like, I really think that there was something to the sleep thing. I really think that there was something to me logging more sleep that actually allowed me to lose more body fat.
But
And
we're gluttons for punishment. That's what it is. We overcomplicate everything
I
because
don't,
I don't really know
yeah,
why, but we don't think that for some reason we don't give ourselves permission to be like, hey, if you sleep, you get your sleep and you don't like shovel trash down your throat. You get outside and you move, whether it's at the gym or you go for a walk or what, like you can create a really, really, really powerful, healthy life. And people are like, yeah, but that's too simple. I'm like, exactly. That's why it's so hard, I think, for most people, is because of its simplicity. And then they just don't stay consistent. But as I'm sure you saw, like with that consistency and simple changes, if you give it enough time, like you won't recognize yourself.
let me ask you that. I know you said that you don't know the answer, but I would just love to hear your theory. When it comes to being a busy father,
Mhm.
busy husband, we haven't even approached the topic of being, father and a husband yet. But men are notorious for like, I am going to throw myself on the sword. In fact, here's the thing, man. Actually, you want to hear a funny story that will really hit this home?
Oh,
So this was like 2 years ago. I actually I stole this meme from social media. Like, and I gave the guy credit. But basically it said there's 168 hours in every single week. You work, 40 to 50 hours a week. You sleep 6 to 8 hours a night. You spend this much time eating, you spend this much time, like literally everything was pretty darn calculated, right? You spend this much time in the bathroom, basically there was like 40 to 50 hours left over per week. Like, and it's like, what are you doing with your time? So I posted that in our mastermind community, and I posted it purposely in our dad edge community where we have 800 guys in the alliance. That's our paid mastermind program. And then we have a big free group that we just post in there, that kind of thing. And I was like, I just want to see what the mindset is for each one of these groups, because I know what my mindset is around it. Post it in the alliance, post it in the free group, post in the alliance, and the feedback was, "Holy cow! I never looked at it that way. I need to be more vigilant with my time. I'm actually spending all this time on Netflix. I'm spending this much time on like video games. Like, I'm actually wasting a lot of time scrolling through social media, and I'm not even realizing it." Right. So that was what they got from there. I posted that in the larger group, and it was like it turned into an absolute chaotic, for lack of a better word, a shit show.
bloodbath.
Yeah. So like what these guys did was like, who sleeps 8 hours a night? I sleep 4. like who works 50 hours a week? I work 90. Like who's measuring these things? And like, so here's the thing, the psychology, right? And I've talked to other people about this, and they were like, here's the thing, like what men do is that somehow, some way, we destroy ourselves, but we take that as like such a noble approach of like, look how burnt out I am. Look how I work myself to the bone. Look how like I have nothing left over for myself every single day, and I still do it. And it's almost like this badge of like being completely fried, right? And I get it. I understand it. I mean, I did it for years myself. But now I know, I'm like, man, that is not the way to go about it, because you don't show up good for anybody doing that. Right. But you think it's noble. But what do you think is the why behind all that? Like, how did we even get there?
I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is what happens neurochemically. So you've got an experience from an individual that is conveying pain, and they're doing it through a noble frame, meaning that what they're looking
Oh,
for is some form of attention and
yeah.
sympathy, which causes a neurochemical release, which makes you feel better about yourself, right? In that moment, because you have a moment of bonding and connection, because someone is sympathetic or empathetic to you, and so you feel seen, you feel heard, you feel understood. And so it's a neurochemical thing that's happening. That's why men do that, is because they don't feel seen, they don't feel heard, they don't feel understood. And so the only way to get some form of feeling that they can justify all the things is scraping around for sympathy from other people. And that's why we tend to wear it as this red badge of courage, because we're killing ourselves, you know. And one of the challenging things about this conversation, though, that happens, Larry, as well, is that we as men, as fathers, I think we have misunderstood in many ways the responsibility that we have to our families. And what I mean by it, let me try and break this down. There's a lot, and I have a buddy of mine named Jimmy Knowles, and he talks all about relationships. And he actually had a piece of content where he shared the other day that I'm going to steal this from. Go check out Jimmy on social. But he had this video that was talking about this guy who was going through a divorce, and basically like he was at the end of his rope, and he was complaining. He's like, yeah, but I go to work, I come home and I take out the trash, and I do my laundry, and I do all this stuff, you know, I try and clean up around the house, and I do all these things for my wife, right? Do all this stuff for my wife and for my family. And then he looked at him, and the other guy looked at him, and he was pretending to be a woman in the little scene or whatever, and asked the guy and said, so if you weren't in a relationship, would you still do all those things? And it clicked,
Yep.
right? Is that we as men have convinced ourselves that we're doing all these things for our families and for our wives, when the fact of the matter is if you didn't have a family and you didn't have your wife, you would still be doing the exact same thing. So don't lie to yourself telling yourself that you're doing it for them, because you're not. You're doing it for you because of part of what what you want to identify as a man, or whatever it is. And I don't mean that to be like shaming or to guilt tripping or anything like that. I think we all have made that mistake, and that was the mistake that I made for the vast majority of my life, until I had a wake up call and I realized, oh my gosh, I'm not actually serving my family. I'm not being present. I'm not being fully engaged. I'm not desperately every single day with intentionality trying to learn the language of my wife and understand her at the deepest level. And you start to focus on doing these things, and you start to remove the need for this weird martyrs complex of I am killing myself. And it's funny, we talked before this, we're talking about empaths, right? Empaths do the same thing, not men and women. Is that empaths get off on having the attention of other people by showing and demonstrating to the world, I'm exhausted, I'm so tired of carrying everything. Oh, you poor thing, come here, right? that type of feeling is it's literally just a neurochemical release. It's happy chemicals. You want to feel seen, you want to feel heard, you want to feel connected and close. But the danger in all of this is that we're just existing. Now, Napoleon Hill talks about this in the book Outwitting the Devil, is that most often we're just drifting through life. That 98% of people, and I actually kind of agree with the statistic, it's like 98% of men, if we're talking just men in particular, they don't have a vision for who they want to become. They haven't gotten crystal clear on what they want out of life. They don't know the father that they want to be, the husband that they want to be, the leader that they want to be. They just don't want what they have right now. And so they live in a perpetual state of saying, well, I don't even know what I want, but I know what I don't want. I don't want this anymore. I don't want to feel this way. I don't want. And so for any man listening today, my biggest encouragement, if you feel stuck in that place of like, I'm just doing everything for everybody and I'm exhausted, maybe try. I would have you consider trying. Define what you want instead and actually start applying yourself to that. Instead of saying, I don't want this, say, I do want this.
That makes total sense. That's a topic that I agree. And I love that book, by the way. That's a topic that most people absolutely positively, that's the way they live their life. I see this all the time. We host a weekly call. It's called the Alliance Kickoff Call. It's when new members come in and, you know, we teach them how to leverage the Alliance, right? Fascinating thing about that is we hear just about every man's story and why he's there and what's going on in his life. And when we do that roundtable and every man shares what's going on in his life, it's literally that, David. It's everything that I don't want. And then here's the funny thing. If I was like, well, what is it you do want? I hear two words all the time: more and better. So, right. And you're shaking your head because I'm sure you've heard this too. So like, I'm like, I'm like, well, hey, when it comes to your marriage, what is it you want? I want more communication. And here's where I'll challenge men. I'll be like, well, if you had more time with your wife, if you had, 6 hours a week versus 1 hour a week, what would you do with it? How would, what does more get, what does more get you? And they're like, well, we would talk about more. Well, what would you talk about? Well, we would, talk about, things that are meaningful. Well, what's meaningful? So you really start to peel back the onion layers. And then when you see men, like you can tell like, wow, I don't know. I've never thought this way. And then I pose this question to them, and I'm sure you probably do this with your clients. I'm like, listen, if you and I were having coffee 6 months from today, so, February 28th, I'm sorry, August 28th, 2023, and you were sitting across from me and you were sharing with me very specifically what had happened in your marriage and the things that you did and the things you experienced to elevate and deepen communication with your wife, what things would you be telling me that happened? And then suddenly, like, you can tell, like, their mind just kind of goes wild in a good way. They start to think, like, well, wait a second. Well, we would probably have like date nights, and I'd probably be asking her like very different questions just to maybe even get to know her all over again. Or like, where will we be in 5 years? Where do you want to go? And for what adventures do you want to go on? I'm like, that's the type of thinking that we need to be thinking about, not focusing, because what we focus on grows and what we focus on expands, even the bad stuff. How do we, in your experience, how do we go about we talked about habits in this podcast. How do we make that a habit? How do we see the world through that lens?
So habits are incredibly challenging because they really only change under one of two circumstances: involuntary pain or voluntary pain. Involuntary pain is most often categorized as the wake up calls of life. Like the story that you just shared, there are going to be things and habits that significantly change in the lives of every single person that was affected by that situation. That was involuntary pain. Sometimes just in life, we experience this a number of different ways. You find out that your wife is leaving you, right? The death of a child. You get a call from the doctor saying you got 6 months left to live. You lose your job. Those are the involuntary wake up calls that literally cause us to our brain almost instantaneously to rewire because it's a traumatic experience, right? And all of a sudden reality gets crystal clear, and what really matters gets crystal clear, and there's so much that happens. But the opposite side, and this is the side that's so incredibly challenging, is what's called voluntary pain. Now, for anyone that knows, like the David Goggins of the world, the Cameron Haynes of the world, the people, the guys that are just like, they seem like they're animals. Like, how do they do these things? They have tapped into and understand something that the average person never will, is that when you lean into voluntary pain and discomfort, there is nothing but tremendous good that comes out of that process. So we talk about working out. Great example of this is that if you go to the gym and you're lifting weights, you are inflicting pain on your body by tearing your muscles so that they can get stronger and heal. You are subjecting yourself to a process that is painful, that you don't feel like doing. That's not something that you're like, oh yeah, woohoo, let's go for a run or let's go to the gym. I think this is one of the best examples of this, because when you submit yourself to the process of doing what you don't feel like doing for long enough, you actually start to create, again, that new neural pathway. It's really, and what's amazing, you can look up like on YouTube and see like the imagery of new neural pathways being created in the brain, those new habits being created, is that you have to say, I'm willing to commit to the process. I'm going to make this decision. I'm going to commit to the process, and I'm going to do this consistently, regardless of how I feel, until it becomes something that is second nature. And when we say second nature, that's effectively the habit. So, right, if you take a runner, someone that runs with consistency, and they've been doing it for 20 years, and you ask them not to run, it's going to be uncomfortable because that's a habit, right? They're like, no. And so they could change that if they wanted to by consistently not running for a period of time, where that part of their identity would transform because the brain has been rewired effectively. And so for us to create new habits in relationships, for example, if you're looking at who you want to become, that's the first question that I always invite people to ask, because everyone's asking, in my opinion, Larry, we're all asking the wrong questions. Everyone's like, what do I need to do to change my health? What do I need to do to change my marriage? What do I need to do to be a better dad? What do I need to do to make more money? What do I need to do? It's fine. It's an okay question. It's just not the best first question. Because the best first question is, who do I want to become? Because when you can define that, now every single thing that you do in your life must come into alignment with the version of you that you said that you would be. If you say, this is the father that I want to become, then every time you're faced with a decision, you just look at that version of you and say, would that version of me do this right now? Yes or no? Simple answer, cut and dry. No, he would not. Okay, I'm not going to do that. Or yes. And so what we need to do gets crystal clear. But the challenging part about this is that, like we were talking about earlier, if you're going to create these new habits, you have to voluntarily subject yourself to what will feel like an uncomfortable, maybe not painful, but an uncomfortable process of doing what you don't feel like doing for long enough that it actually becomes a habit. And when we say habits, what I mean by that is that it actually becomes a part of your encoding and how your brain is wired. So it's second nature. You no longer have to think about it anymore. And it's just part of who you are.
I have this good friend of mine, just to really double down on what you just said, is not what do I need to do? Because we're not human doings. Last time I looked, we're human beings, right? It's who do I want to become?
Yeah.
And so I've got this fantastic friend of mine. He's also a coach, Fraser Bailey. He's a plant-based bodybuilder. He literally looks like the Incredible Hulk. Like, and he's vegan, no HRT, no steroids or nothing. He's actually Chris Daughtry's personal plant-based coach as well. But like the kindest man heart like you would ever like, and he literally looks like the most intimidating dude on the planet. But he's from New Zealand, and he's been my coach for nutrition for 3 years. And so he's always talking about, and I'm going to butcher this. He was like, Larry, let me tell you something right now, man. He's like, you cannot be thinking about Larry 1.0, man. you have to be thinking about Larry 2.0, right? And Larry 2.0 has very different ways of how he lives and his habits and all that. And he's like, I'm telling you right now, man, like Larry 1.0, there's a fat kid in there, man. He's like, the Snicker bars and all this other stuff that you do, you sneak and all that. That's Larry 1.0. Who you want to become is the 2.0. So before you make it, whatever decision you're going to make, run it through the filter. Is this 1.0 or 2.0? Who do I want to become? It's not the doing thing. It's who do I want to become? I don't know what it was about just hearing that, but I was like, oh my gosh, like it literally transforms how you operate, because I'm like, well, is this in line with the person that I want to be? Right. I think when we do really big things, like you mentioned 75 hard, right? Or maybe somebody getting ready for a marathon, or somebody getting ready for like a bodybuilding show, like my son and I did, right? You have to become that person because you have something on your calendar that you committed to, that other people are, and for me and my son, it was my son that was watching me. Is like, I have to become this person. I have no choice. Like, I am going to do this. And I think that's the biggest difference between being a human doing and being a human being, right?
Well, what's interesting, there's two things that you just mentioned that I don't want to like gloss over, is that so we talk about this a lot, especially as men, is like the word integrity. And I believe that there's two sides to the integrity coin. And this is absolutely essential, and why I honor you for what you're doing for men, and what you have for the alliance and serving men, is that for some reason, the average man, if he gives his word to you, he will keep it. Now, not all of them. For the average man, because his integrity is on the line, there is now another party involved in this decision making process. And come hell or high water, his integrity is too valuable to not keep his word. However, the average man simultaneously, repeatedly, and perpetually breaks trust with himself and his personal integrity, because he's constantly making promises to himself that he does not keep. And so if you have a relationship, if I have a relationship with you, Larry, and I give you my word and I keep breaking it over and over and over again, are you going to trust me?
No,
Are you going to respect me?
no,
Are you going to have any confidence in our relationship?
no. I mean, it won't be a deep relationship, but, still hang out with you. I still want to help you.
It's the exact same way with our relationship with ourselves. If we can see ourselves through this frame and understand that when we consistently break our word to ourselves, we are breaking trust within ourselves. Why you don't have self-trust? Why you don't have self-respect? Why you don't have confidence? You have nothing to fall back on that says, yeah, I can trust myself. I've been faithful to keep my word to myself. And so why it's so powerful for us to have accountability, especially early on in the transformational process, is that self-accountability, unless you have been in an environment of accountability where you are seen, heard, and understood, where you have guys that will come alongside you and they'll call you on your stuff, but they'll also be a shoulder to cry on. They'll remind you of who you said that you would be. They're going to call you up to the standard you set for yourself as a husband, as a father, as a leader in all these areas. When you are in that type of environment for long enough, eventually you do become self-accountable, because you understand that in order for you to be the leader that you've been called to be, you have to be self-accountable. And then when you become self-accountable, then I believe you are positioned to help hold other people accountable, but only when that relationship has been established and accountability has been requested and invited. You can't force accountability. So that was number one. But number two, what you're talking about with this version of who we're becoming, right? And defining who we want to become. I find that most men, they have struggle with that question, but also, like you mentioned earlier, the question, what do you want? Right? The average guy can't answer that. Like,
I
well, I
agree.
mean, dude, I just, I want more sex, or I want $1 million, or I want to have a better job, or I want to whatever. And the problem with that is that it is not specific. When we say like we want more communication, I love that you take people through that questioning process, because it's so incredibly important. But when you can start to visualize, like you had us do, go 6 months into the future, say, look back, right? This is where it gets really powerful. There's a great book by Todd Herman called The Alter Ego
Oh, I
Effect.
love that book.
Fantastic read. That is exactly how I started my transformational process, is that I remember standing in the bathroom with a 9mm in my hand, done, 60 pounds heavier than I am right now, I was working 70, 80, 90 hours a week. So for all those guys listening, they're like, you don't understand. I get it. I was married. Daughter was roughly 6 months old. This was April, I think it was 18th, 2018. If I'm, it's either the 28th or the 18th, 2018. And I heard a couple things very distinctly. The first was when I was done. And I know we don't have too much time to give all that full backstory, but I remember hearing "I love you" very clearly. And then what I felt was God. I felt in that moment more words came and said, "You get to decide. You get to commit. You get to become. I am with you and I am for you. But I can't fix this. You have to put in the work required." And I realized, Larry, that, and this is for any man that's out there that has any form of relationship with God or trying to restore relationship with God, it was in that moment where I realized I had been blaming life and God and saying, God, if you want to fix this, you should fix this. And I'm desperate, like praying day after day, God, fix this. Like, give me wisdom, give me clarity. What job do I need? Like, what do I need to do? All this stuff. And I didn't realize that at the end of all of this, the transformational question was, it came down to that question of who do you want to become? But I had to give myself permission to define that. And I had never given myself permission to define that because I thought my whole life, that's God's job. It's God's job to tell me what my calling is. And this is where I'm going with this. I'll wrap this up in just a second. When we talk about purpose, talk about calling, we talk about meaning in life. Purpose, if we dial into that word, there are so many people out and alive today that feel like they don't have meaning. They don't have purpose. Well, Larry, I'm going to ask you a couple quick questions. What's the purpose of eating?
Make sure that we have fuel to live,
What's the purpose of taking a shower?
to make sure that we're clean and then we don't get sick and have bacteria on us to where, we get sick.
And what's the purpose of driving a car?
To get where we need to go.
Our lives become filled with purpose and meaning when we know what result we want. If you want to get where you're trying to go, the purpose of driving the car is to get where you want to go. If you want to find yourself filled, the purpose of eating is that. You want to be clean, the purpose of taking a shower. This is why so often we miss purpose and fulfillment and joy and peace and what we're creating and how we're living as fathers and as husbands, is that we haven't given ourselves permission to define the result that we want. And when we give ourselves permission to define the result that we want, who we want to become, every single part of our life now has purpose and meaning because it's in alignment, like you said, with that version of us. And suddenly you have purpose, you have meaning, you have vision, you have clarity, you have excitement and anticipation, because now you're actively working towards something because you gave yourself permission to define the result that you want to create.
It makes total sense, man. I really want to use this last segment to really use what you just said as a launching pad, because I want you to think about what's your wife's name?
Jesse.
Jesse?
Mm-hmm.
I have a Jessica. So that's kind of cool. I knew I liked you, right? We knew we knew we had chemistry right away. And then your kids.
Yeah.
That vision, that purpose. And which, by the way, I just want to acknowledge something that I have just sensed for almost the past hour now. You come across to me, and I know not every man is perfect, right? We all have our moments, but you come across to me as like this very stable, safe haven for your kids and your wife. Like, to where, like, I even get the sense there's like this, like this 6-year-old kid in me that if you were my dad, I'd be like, man, I want to hang out with you. And when things go bad, I want to come and figure it out. Like, help me figure this out. And I think I'm correct in that analysis. I think I'm correct in that, you know, what I think is probably what you bring to your family. Is that dead on?
That is, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Now, I would really love to know, and I think I know the answer to this, but I really want to get in the weeds of your life day to day and what that means. So, like, let's just say raising three kids under five is not easy, right? Being an
No, it's a lot.
entrepreneur, being an entrepreneur, it's not easy. There are things that we deal with that it looks like it's all rosy and wonderful, right? And you're like, oh wow, the joys of a business owner, right? And then there are trials and tribulations. When you first married Jesse, you know, kids weren't around. It was just you guys. And your relationship changes with one kid, then two, and then three. And but yet there still seems to be this sort of beautiful balance that you carry with you. And I just want to know in the day to day when things go wrong, or when dinner time kids are acting a fool and one kid gets slapped and mac and cheese gets thrown across the room, and Jesse is like, hey, you know, I expect you to do this, this, and this. Why didn't you do it? So how do you constantly bring this approach?
I will say I'm not perfect at it.
Yeah.
That's the first thing. I'm not perfect at it. But what I will say is that you'll be hard pressed to find a more intentional man. And I say that with all humility and with confidence because for the overwhelming majority of my life, I accepted the nice things that people said about me, but I didn't believe them, Larry. I accepted them, but I didn't believe them. I didn't believe that I was a good father. And if I started to believe that, I thought it was incredibly arrogant and pretentious for me to say so. And it's always terrified me. It's kind of like those situations like when somebody's a hero, right? Like everyone's calling them a hero, but the person themselves not allowed to say I'm a hero for whatever reason, even though everybody knows that they're a hero. I don't understand why that is. And I think it's because we have a gross misunderstanding of what competence can and should look like because of the fear of arrogance and the fear of being misunderstood and the fear of pretense. And so for me, I govern my life based on three things: integrity, responsibility, and accountability. Integrity is broken into two parts, kind of what we talked about previously, is that am I keeping my word that I give to other people? And am I keeping my word to myself? Responsibility is taking ownership for every single part of my life. I don't believe that, you know, my wife and I have an incredible marriage, and we are, I would say that it's hard to talk about marriage sometimes, I think, in the day and age that we live in, because I want to talk about how incredible it is, but everyone always interprets it as shaming, if that makes sense. My relationship with my wife has developed and grown to where sex is better than it's ever been before. We're coming up on 9 years. Connection, communication, the adventure, dreaming, all of it has come through a process of a lot of stupidity. And all of it comes down to me and not taking ownership and always looking to blame or to justify and all these types of things. And when I started to really take responsibility for it all, I started to realize, like, it doesn't take two people to make a happy marriage. It only takes one. And I know a lot of people might disagree with that. But when you step into it and then you operate from a place of accountability where I'm accountable to my wife, I'm accountable to my coaches and mentors, I'm accountable to my pastors, I'm accountable to my best friend, I'm accountable to the people in my life that I've given permission to say, this is the man that I will be. And if you see me fall below this standard, you have my permission to kick my ass. Call me out in love and remind me that I'm a son of God. And that is not how a son of God operates, right? And so those three things, when integrated into my daily life, have given me a lot of freedom, in the sense that when I mess up, I take ownership, but I don't internalize anymore. And what I mean by that is that for most of my life, when I would mess up, like the thoughts and the demons and all, like I would just like, I don't want to cuss on here, but I would literally beat the shit out of myself. constantly for messing up and making a mistake and for raising my voice or, losing my cool or whatever it was. And now I'm to a point where I 100% take ownership, but I don't internalize it anymore. I just take it as really useful feedback. I apologize and I move forward. And I think that's one of the things that's brought a lot of stability to me. And hopefully, and I'm grateful you said that. That's been one of my prayers for years, is that when people get around me, there's two things that I want. I want them to feel safe, but I also want them to know that I'm not a tame lion. And that comes from Aslan, that comes from Jesus, that comes from my belief system. And when it comes to dealing with the kids and being that, I've realized that most of us, we're desperately craving more time with our spouses and time with our kids, when really what we're failing to do is simply be intentional with the time that we have. And so when you focus on being intentional and living every single moment anchored into the present, letting go of the past, learning from it and getting better. And the only time that we're focused on future is when we're casting vision and we're creating. This is where we're headed, but we're anchored in the present moment. Slow is smooth, smooth is fast. And so I found that when there's a Travis Ritchie, one of my good buddies, he has this quote that I've adopted every time, because I built an office here behind my house. Every time I go in the house, when dad gets home, he sets the tone. And so I can walk in and my wife's like, somebody's about to die. like things, somebody's been slapping each other, whatever. But I know that when I walk in, what I believe to be the Holy Spirit that I have surrendered to, it just leaks out over my entire home, everywhere. And there's peace and there's calm. And it has to do with the fact that I'm assuming ownership and responsibility. I think mothers have the same way to do that. Like, it's not just a dad thing, but is something different about when dad gets home, his emotional state sets the standard across the board. And there's tremendous power and responsibility in that. And so I don't know if that's an answer to your question, but hopefully it is.
No, man, that was that was awesome. And I agree with you. You ever do this thing where you kind of zoom out from the room? You just sort of like watch yourself with your family and you watch your family with you and
You get
wife.
all the feels, man. You kind of tear up a little bit. You're like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this is my life.
Yeah. I did this not too terribly long ago, and I did it one night when I was in a bad mood and one night when I was in a great mood. And I literally just sort of objectively watched the tone in the room with everybody and how they interacted. I'm not saying that sounds really narcissistic, and I don't mean it that way, but I want to really double down on what you just said, because I believe it to my core. And I've also experienced this with my own father, and even with my father-in-law. When those guys are in good moods, house feels all right. When they're not, it's like, ooh, maybe we should leave. So I zoomed out and I noticed how my family was operating. I wasn't proud of it, and I knew it was because of me.
Yeah.
And then I zoomed out on a happy night, and I was like, man, everybody's joyous, right? And there is that impact, right, with your family. So I love that, man. What a great way to end. So it's to bring that positivity, bring that joy, to your family, because we can be the catalyst for that. This has been, David, this has been awesome, man. As we wrap up here, I want to make sure the audience can find you and the amazing person that you are, and best way to connect with you.
Anywhere on social media at David Waldy. You can Google me. You can
Yeah.
hit up my website, whatever you want. Just hit me up and we'll connect. I'm all
Awesome.
about people and relationships.
Well, gentlemen, not to worry. We're going to have all the links in the show notes for you. Head on. By the way, I'll have David's about page in there, which fascinating story, which he touched upon it today. But just gives you some context to who this human being is and the amazing person he is. Head on over to thedadedge.com/Friday92 for this show. Again, thedadedge.com/Friday92. David, this was awesome. Thank you so much for coming on, man. This was great.
Larry, it was an honor. Thank you for having me, brother.
Thank you. Gentlemen, go out, live legendary. Take care.